Thank you to the City of New Westminster for the opportunity to come and share a health perspective on what's been happening. I want to make it clear at the beginning that the views that I'm expressing are the views of the Chief Medical Health Officer under the Public Health Act. So this is not a Fraser health statement. This is a view under my responsibilities as the Chief Medical Health Officer to protect the public under the Public Health Act. So it's actually a formal process under a legislative requirement. And I just want to try and put the dichotomy that we're facing as a health authority into the particular process. I believe jobs are good. I believe jobs in municipalities provide economic benefit, and that the revenue to municipalities helps provide further services and helps people in general in those communities to have a better quality of life. Conversely, I believe the regular inhalation of coal dust is not good. In the context of working in a mine or being in the facility of a mine, there's lots of good data about, ants, black lung and various pneumoconiosis and so on. And there's data from people who live in, parts of Queensland and West Virginia and various other spots that if you have a high intake of coal dust, it's not real good for your developing baby, and it's not good for your lungs and various other things. So, this is a question of, is the benefit provided by the jobs outweighed in any way by an exposure pathway that means lots of people are going to be sucking in coal dust, and that we need to balance it. So it's not a matter of jobs are good, it's a matter of jobs are good, but is there any downside to this? And that's the bit that we need to establish as part of that. And we are aware that there is significant community concern. So there is a proposal, and I'm not going to go through that because we've had Jeff go through that already with you, quite specifically about it. When Health looked at this process, we took into account that we really want to have a rigorous bid for this 4 million tonnes, because I keep looking over the border down south, and increasingly it's becoming difficult in Washington State or Oregon to ship your coal out through a port there. They're making it harder and harder. There's something like 200 million tonnes of development proposed there. There's 250 million tonne developments. So, we're talking about 4 million tonnes. It's not a lot, but, the principle behind what we should be looking at is important, because maybe in 5 years' time we're talking about, an order of magnitude more than what we're discussing today. And lots of people think differently, and there's people who want to have a discussion about global warming or coal dust and what we're doing it. That's not part of what my role is. I mean, I'm not here to save you from global warming or climate change. I'm here to see whether or not there's an impact on the public with the transport of the coal and the export of the coal in the whole way. And part of the challenge of this is that Port Metro owns Fraser Surrey Docks permitting process, and they don't own the permitting process for the train from Peace Arch all the way to there, and they don't own a permitting process from the docks up to Texada Island and the barge travel. And so, they could come out with a statement that says, we're confident that there is no issue in the footprint that's FSD, but from a health department, we want to be confident that there's no issue from the footprint that starts when you get to the border and disappears when you're on a truck going out the other side. And so, all aspects of this are important to us as we work through this process, and we want to be clear that we don't believe that the public is tolerant of something that says, I only look at this bit or I only look at that bit, and that's some other bureaucracy's role to do it. So the health view can be summarised quite succinctly. The data that we have been provided with at this stage from Fraser Surrey Docks on the dust movement is insufficient for us to say that we believe there's no issue, and we need some more work done. And we've written to Metro Vancouver, and Roger Kwan's here today saying that as the permitting group for the airshed, we're hoping that they do more than what we've seen so far. There really is not very much data at all that's been provided on the dust movement along the route. I get statements from BNSF saying our surfactant means that 85% of this is not lost or is reduced. I mean, it's 85% of what? I'm not really sure what it is that they're telling me, and we want more. We want a comprehensive health impact assessment undertaken for this process. that includes meaningful community consultation as part of that. And really, most importantly in this, it includes a verification component, so that whatever the computer's saying, and we're saying, yep, that looks good, there's actually a process that says afterwards, well, that's actually what happened. You know, that our modelling produced what the output. So the health impact assessment needs to include the following: the impacts of the airborne dust from PSARCH along the way, potential contamination of land and water, you know, the food and fish, if that's impacted by what we're doing with this, the diesel exhaust impacts. We're going to have a lot of rail traffic, we're going to have a lot of cars waiting at crossings and various other bits on the way. The impact of noise, I mean, I haven't seen the data on this at this point. The impact on emergency care access. Some of these trains take 15 minutes to cross at PSARCH. There's a statement in one of the documents we got which said, you know, we give priority to emergency vehicles. Now, I'm not sure how you stop a train of, you know, so many carriages. It takes 15 minutes so that the ambulance can go across at the time. So we want to see what that's about. And we want some understanding of the overall community wellness impact of this as we go down through that pathway. The verification to us is a critical part of what we're going. We've heard that, you know, we're going to have some total particulate stuff there, and we're going to have a look at the NOx. We want it broader than that. We want to see some particulate monitoring going on. We're really saying that I suspect they're going to do modelling and the rest of it, and I'm going to look at it and I'm going to think that's okay. But I want to be clear that after that there needs to be, in sensitive sites, sufficient monitors for us to say, I can look at the data on the web, and the people in this auditorium tonight can look at the data on the web, and we can see exactly what is happening. And at that time, if it turns out that in fact what we thought was going to happen isn't what's going to happen, then the permitting process must include a process whereby there will be mitigation automatically, so that it says, well, if you're actually not producing a safe environment, then the mitigation kicks in and it stops as part of that. And I think that's really important. So in summary, as the Chief Health Officer, I am not in favour of this proposal, but as the Chief Health Officer, I am not against this proposal. I'm saying I don't know enough today, and I think I should know enough before we all say this is a great idea, because the jobs are important in the Fraser Valley. We don't know enough as a group. We should know that before we start. And, you know, this is not a matter of leave it in the ground or not. There are safeguards that can be built into most of the things that we're talking about. We want to see that that's clearer than it is to me at this particular time before it goes ahead. Thank you.
change and environment field, both with the government and also in consulting. Roger.
Thank you, Peter, and good evening, everybody. It's not really fair to go last, especially after that, but I'll do my best. I do want to thank the City of New Westminster for the opportunity to present tonight. This is a very important issue for Metro Vancouver. I do have a number of senior officials from Metro Vancouver here with me, although I can't see them. I'm pretty sure they're out there. We have Ray Robb, who's the Regulation and Enforcement Division Manager, somewhere. Kathy Preston, who's a senior engineer, also in Regulation and Enforcement. There she is. And my boss, Delia Laglagaron, who's the General Manager of Planning, Policy and Environment, and also the Deputy CAO at Metro Vancouver. I'm not sure where Delia is. So, let me get organized here, sorry. So I'm just going to give a quick overview of the presentation I'm going to give tonight. To give you some context on the Metro Vancouver airshed, the potential impacts of coal shipment activity, what our role is in the review process and how we work with Port Metro Vancouver on that process, and then the next steps for Metro Vancouver, including discussion at our Board of Directors level. We've heard a bit of discussion about the activity, coal shipment activity in the Pacific Northwest. And it would be an understatement to say that there's a lot of public concern about coal terminal expansion, not just here in Metro Vancouver, but throughout the Pacific Northwest. This is a map from a presentation that I attended probably about 3 weeks ago at a meeting of air quality authorities north and south of the border. And you can certainly see the number of new coal facilities in southern Washington state, proposed coal facilities, some of them quite large. I hope some numbers came up there, in the range of 30 to 40 million tons per year, so larger than the facilities that we're talking about here. And then there is the Gateway Pacific Terminal, just very close to the Canada-US border at Cherry Point in Whatcom County. And that is proposed to be a 48 million ton per year facility. So these Washington state coal facilities are, to my knowledge, all at various stages of applying for their regulatory approvals. None of them have been given the go-ahead at this point, and as we've heard, the process is fairly rigorous in the state of Washington. So this is a slide that was provided by the Washington State Department of Ecology. They've kind of tucked us Canadians up into the top left-hand corner there, but they do show the three facilities that are under consideration here. So we have Neptune Terminals, which already exists. It's handling metallurgical coal, but it's proposing to expand from 8 to 18 million tons. We have the West Shore terminals at Deltaport, already at about probably 27, 28 million tons per year, but with a capacity to get to 33 million tons per year. And then what we're discussing tonight, the Fraser Surrey Docks facility, which currently does not handle coal, but is proposing to handle as much as 8 million tons per year. And if we looked at, and I think Dr. Van Buynder referred to this earlier, in total, all of the capacity that's shown on this map is close to 200 million tons per year of coal moving through the Pacific Northwest, largely from the Powder River Basin mine that you can see on the right-hand side of that map there. So what is it that we're concerned about from an air quality perspective? First of all, there's all the engines that are handling the coal. There's rail locomotive engines, there's tugboats hauling barges of coal down the Fraser River to Texada Island, and then there's all the loaders and other equipment at the stationary coal facility itself. And these engines all generally burn some grade of diesel fuel, and reducing exposure to diesel particulate matter is one of the priority focus areas in our air quality program at Metro Vancouver. Our assessments, which have been supported by the health authorities, puts the reduction of diesel particulate matter as the #1 health priority. And so the #1 health risk from exposure to air pollution in our urban airshed comes from diesel particulate matter. And then there's the coal dust itself. Dust coming off of the rail cars as they move from the United States to Fraser Surrey Docks on barges and at the facility itself. And although it is proposed as a direct from rail to barge transfer, there are emissions anytime you handle coal. And there may also be the temporary storage on site. I'm not going to discuss the health impacts because Dr. Van Buynder described that earlier, the health risk associated with exposure to coal dust. So I've tried to tabulate here the different sources and potential impacts, and more importantly, the government agencies who have what I would describe as primary jurisdiction over these sources. Rail and marine in the first 4 rows are quite similar. Both coal dust and engine exhaust are a potential source of concern from both an air quality perspective and a health perspective. And in terms of climate change, the larger concern, as we've already heard, is with the transport overseas, so that's the emissions along the ocean-going vessels as we move the coal across the ocean, and the end use of coal in the coal-fired power generation systems, or even in steel-making processes for metallurgical coal. And Andrew spoke to this earlier. And for both marine and rail transport, the lead jurisdiction is with the federal government under, for example, the Railway Safety Act or the Canada Shipping Act, and Environment Canada for different standards restricting fuel quality. Now, moving to the Fraser Surrey Docks facility itself, this is where both Port Metro Vancouver and Metro Vancouver have a role. As Greg explained earlier, Port Metro Vancouver would issue a project permit to Fraser Surrey Docks, who are a leaseholder on Port federal lands. And I guess the analogy is this is kind of like a building permit that the city of Westminster would issue to a landowner in this city. Now, Metro Vancouver is the authority for air quality permits and regulations, and I'm going to go drill down into that in the next slide and explain how that works. So under the Provincial Environmental Management Act, Metro Vancouver has the delegated authority for air quality management in this region. We are guided by an overarching air quality management plan. This is our policy framework for managing air quality in the region. Our current plan was adopted by our board of directors, and that's elected officials from the 24 local governments that make up Metro Vancouver, the Greater Vancouver Regional District. Our current plan was adopted by our board in 2011. It includes 81 different actions in the areas of improving air quality and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Now, under our delegated authority, our board has the ability to adopt bylaws and regulations regarding air quality. The main air quality bylaw that we operate under does enable a system of permits which apply to large industrial sources. These are individual facilities, things like cement plants, refineries, chemical plants, and bulk commodities terminals. We currently administer close to 200 permits, and a number of these are in fact on port lands. We have a separate regulation and enforcement group led by Ray Robb, who I introduced earlier. They make the permitting decisions, they carry out the inspections, and they promote compliance with the conditions that are established in the Metro Vancouver air quality permits. So Fraser Surrey Docks at this point has been advised that they do need an air permit from Metro Vancouver. Earlier this month, we received an air emissions permit application from Fraser Surrey Docks. And I want to emphasize that this is distinct from the project permit application that Fraser Surrey Docks has submitted to Port Metro Vancouver. So we are in the process of reviewing the permit application, but we've also reviewed the information that they've previously submitted to the port. And on the basis of the information that Fraser Surrey Docks air quality consultants have provided, we've analyzed in terms of the overall air emissions loading in the region. This is the emissions of the sum of all the pollutants that contribute to smog in our airshed. That would include nitrogen oxides, sulfur oxides, volatile organic compounds, fine particulate matter, and ammonia. And recognizing that Fraser Surrey Docks has indicated they may incrementally increase coal handling capacity as the project proceeds, we look at the emissions totals in the years 2 to 5 and years 6 plus, and that's at 4 million and 8 million tons per year of coal. And we're looking at about 20 to 40 tons of annual emissions. And that isn't huge in the overall context of the airshed. It's actually less than 0.1% of airshed totals. But equally, we have to look at what this means to the local community, and certainly that's why you're all here tonight. The consultants have used a dispersion modeling approach to predict what the concentrations will be in the areas adjacent to the proposed facility. They've concluded a number of things. Firstly, that the particulate concentrations are going to be localized around the Fraser Surrey Docks facility. The exceedances of the ambient air quality objectives, these are the guidelines and standards that we use to provide benchmarks for the quality of the air. Adjacent to the marine sources and along the fence lines and within the rail yard, there will be exceedances of the ambient air quality objectives. And then beyond the fence line, the modeling that the consultants have done shows low impacts and within ambient air quality objectives. However, our initial review does leave us with some questions that would have to be addressed as we review the permit process, the permit application. It certainly appears that not all of the sources of fugitive dust within the facility have been included in the modeling. And it also appears that the emissions of coal dust and engine exhaust from barges and locomotives in transit have not been included, and we know these to be a significant concern. This is a scoping issue. It's what the Fraser Surrey Dock consultants have assessed in the area in the vicinity of their proposed facility, and they did not look at the transiting emissions associated with rail cars and barges. So moving forward with Metro Vancouver's role, our staff will review the Fraser Surrey Docks permit application. As noted earlier, we do have these questions about the sources included and the scope of the review conducted to date. We expect that we'll be following up with the proponent on these issues. Ultimately, our regulation and enforcement manager will make an independent and unfettered permitting decision guided by the relevant facts and applicable law. The permit process at Metro Vancouver does include public notification, and this is specified under the provincial public notification regulation. I do want to emphasize that our permit will not and cannot address sources and emissions associated with transiting of coal. And this is the barges and locomotives that I noted earlier, which are primarily under the jurisdiction of the federal government, Transport Canada, and Environment Canada. So these emissions are definitely of concern, and the need for appropriate mitigation measures and monitoring will be raised with Port Metro Vancouver and the federal government agencies. So lastly, in terms of how we work with the port, for the most part, we've worked fairly well collaboratively with the port. There are a number of success stories, including the Northwest Ports Clean Air Strategy, which is a strategy with actions that are endorsed by not just Port Metro Vancouver, but also the Port of Seattle and the Port of Tacoma. The port has an air action program. They have a truck licensing system, which requires that only newer, low-emission trucks can access port gates. And we have a shore power system at Canada Place, which basically means that cruise ships, when they're berthed at the port, can actually shut off their diesel generators, and again, diesel is one of our most significant concerns, and plug into electrical grid systems. Having said that, we believe that the process of referring projects between Port Metro Vancouver, the health authorities, and the senior levels of government could certainly be improved. And I should stress that that works both ways. Comparing notes and collaborating in advance of permit decisions would allow us to jointly scope out the environmental assessment process. I'm sure that would also make life easier for the applicant. We would want to include the health authorities in this for their expertise in health impact assessment. So the next steps for Metro Vancouver, our board of directors will be considering this issue at their meeting on June 14th. This issue has already gone through our Environment and Parks Committee, which is a subcommittee, if you will, of the board that advises the board on matters related to both environment and regional parks. It has gone through that committee on 2 occasions, and their recommendations are going forward to the board on June 14th. The recommendations that are coming from the committee are firstly that the board should express its opposition to coal shipments from the Fraser River estuary, other than through the existing Roberts Bank coal port. Also to call on the port for a more formalized referral process between Port Metro Vancouver and Metro Vancouver. Support for the inclusion of the health impact assessments, which Dr. Van Buynder spoke of earlier. And finally, advocating to the senior governments for mitigation measures, not only the mitigation measures, but the follow-up monitoring to address emission sources that are not within Metro Vancouver's permitting jurisdiction. So that's where I'll close. I understand we're taking questions from all of the panelists at the end, and I am the last panelist, so I think we're moving into question period. There's a graphic here of our Caring for the Air document, which I think I left about 50 copies of at the front table, and it's a document that describes all of the air quality programs that we have in Metro Vancouver, so if you have a chance to pick that up, we'd really appreciate that. Thank you.